Ruby May has something to say. Written by David Small. The town of Nada, Texas was small. You could stand on one side of town, whisper something, and be heard on the other side. It was that small. Still, Nada had a few things in it. There was a general store, an abandoned train depot, a three-legged dog, and the world headquarters for universal peace and understanding. The world headquarters was in the home of Miss Ruby May Foote. Ruby May had a big dream. She wanted to speak at the United Nations in New York City to deliver her message of universal peace and understanding. But Ruby May also had a big problem. She was tongue-tied. Sometimes she mixed up the letters of words. "There is nothing like a well-boiled icicle." Without meaning to, she insulted people. "Why, Ruby May, you look mighty cool in that cotton dress. You don't look so hot yourself." At other times, for no apparent reason, she was just plain incomprehensible. "Chud wa buzna faba pitsnizzle." Because of this, the residents of Nada had written off Ruby May Foote as a goofball. Billy Bob was Ruby May's young nephew. He wanted to be an inventor of things that would benefit all humanity. But try as he might, he could think of nothing new. Then, one day, he had an idea. He went into the kitchen. Cupboard doors banged, drawers slammed, utensils clashed. Shortly, Billy Bob emerged with his new invention. It was an old colander with things wired on. Around the rim, a nutcracker, a bottle opener, and a pastry brush. On top, some holiday pine cones. "Aunt Ruby May," he exclaimed, "your troubles are over. Put this on and get ready to give your message to the world." "Feel anything?" asked Billy Bob. Ruby May shook her head. The pine cones rattled dryly. "Speak," urged her nephew. He made a few adjustments. "Anything now?" "Nothing, Bobby Bill," she replied. "I mean Bolly Bib. I mean Bibby Blob. I mean—" Removing it from his aunt's head, the boy disappeared into the kitchen. Moments later he returned with a new, improved apparatus. He had taken off the pine cones and added a melon ball scoop, a wire whisk, and a corkscrew standing upright. And it worked. 7 years ago. Nothing daunted Ruby May now that she could talk straight. First she became mayor of Nada, then governor of Texas. Hers was a meteoric rise. Curiously, she never appeared in public without a big hat on her head. Billy Bob's invention was in need of a name. They called it the Babatron. As time went on, Billy Bob made additions and improvements to his original design. As the Babatron grew, so did Ruby May's hats. At last it happened. Ruby May was invited to speak at the United Nations General Assembly in New York. Ruby May and Billy Bob took a taxi from the airport to the United Nations Plaza. For the special occasion, she wore an enormous hat covered with doves of peace. Then disaster struck. With a rush of wings and a savage shriek, a pigeon hawk swooped down from a nearby skyscraper and snatched the hat in its powerful talons. Away the bird flew to some distant eyrie, taking it with it the doves of peace, the hat, and the Babatron. Ruby May looked pale and unnerved. Billy Bob whispered, "Aunt Ruby May, I've been meaning to tell you, you don't need that old piece of junk on your head to speak well. It's in your mind. You can give your message without it." Smiling weakly, Ruby May went into the auditorium. Flashbulbs popped, cameras whirled, satellites shot pictures of Ruby May around the globe as she ascended to the podium. Guests from every nation in the world held their breath in eager anticipation of the words about to be spoken. Ruby May cleared her throat, opened her mouth, and started to speak. "Nizam Fook Walul Wopple." Her words were meaningless babble. In the translator's booth, panic broke out. They pawed through dictionaries of 93 languages, but could not decipher one word. In the auditorium, people tapped their earphones and shook their heads. Meanwhile, a small boy raced for the exit. Billy Bob fled to the stairs and sped to the basement. In the gigantic United Nations kitchen, hors d'oeuvres for 6,000 were being prepared. Billy Bob had no time to explain. He ripped the necessary equipment from the hands of the chefs, assembled it as the elevator rose back to the 3rd floor, ran to the podium, and clapped the Babatron onto his aunt's head. As Ruby May turned to the audience, her head crowned with its tangle of copper, aluminum, tin, and wire, a mild titter arose in the room. The titter grew to a chorus of guffaws and cackles. At last the whole lot of world leaders was convulsed with laughter. Then Ruby May Foote stepped forward and raised her hand for silence. "My friends," she said in a level tone, "leaders of the world, my message to you is simple. To achieve universal peace and understanding on this planet, you have only to speak plainly, even though you may look foolish. This is 1,000 times better than looking good and talking nonsense." The planet Earth was small. You could stand on one side, whisper something, and be heard on the other side. It was that small. Still, Earth had a few things on it. For one thing, it had Nada Texas, Ruby May Foote, and the world's headquarters for universal peace and understanding.